we're going to start a new project called form test. So we're just going to create a new directory. And in that directory, we will create our server.py file. Again, you may have noticed sometimes when you copy and paste directly from the platform, you sometimes get some syntax errors, especially in Python, because spacing is so important. So it never hurts, and it's not bad practice to just go ahead and start from scratch. Just remind yourself as you type, just think a little bit about all the lines that we're entering. So remember, we're going to need render template because we're doing that now. We're going to create an instance of our Flask app. And let's create a route to start that just shows us a form. So we're going to start with post request. But notice, and it's important to remember, that what we're doing here is showing the form. So showing the form is different from processing the form. Whenever you want to process a form, think to yourself that you're probably going to need two routes. One to just show the form and another route to actually handle the form. So let's get started with that. So if I have that, I know I'm going to need a templates folder. So a little trick here is if you know you're going to need a folder and a file, go ahead and templates/index.html, and it will actually create the folder for you. Pretty handy. All right, so here, let's just test to make sure, and do just a few things at once. Don't try to do everything at once. Before we put any form on there, let's just make sure that our function is running, or that we've got everything set up properly. So let's just go ahead and try to run the server to see if it's working. We've got it. Oh, I'm just returning a file that says index.html. Oops, I forgot to actually call the function render template. There we go. We've got a form. So now let's go ahead and put some form stuff on it. So if you're watching the short video where we go over this, let's have this, and let's go ahead and put a p tag with a name and an input field. Oops. And we'll give it the name of username. If you're following the platform, the names might be a little bit different, but this just helps you distinguish between which things have to be named what. Because as we go through this, you're going to start noticing that there's going to be a lot of different variable names floating around. So let's just refresh our HTML to see if all of that got updated. Great. So now we've got a name and email input. So let's just inspect our element to make sure that we've got those names on our form. Here we see, yep, this one's called username and this one's called email. So now what we're going to do is actually create an action, right? We have to specify when we submit this form, where is it going to go? What route is it going to take, right? What request is it going to make? So let's just call it process. And that means that over here, if we have a route, an action that goes to process, that means we should probably have a route that goes to process. So let's try this out, and I like running into a few errors so that you can start recognizing them and understanding how to troubleshoot them. So we'll call this process the form, and let's just make a print statement in the process form method function. All right, and we're not really sure what we want to render yet, so let's just see if it works. We'll get an error, but that'll be something else to learn from too. So if we type this, and we'll just go type something in and hit submit. Oh, first error. Let's just see, did we even hit our route? Notice it made this GET request. It tried to make a POST request, but got a 405 error and said this method is not allowed. So you may remember from here that what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're letting the route know that it is allowed to take POST requests. So we're on the HTML page. A form can only make one type of request. So here it's a singular method is POST. But on this side in Flask, what we're telling it is that by default, it always accepts GET requests. But in here, we're going to be able to provide a list of different request types that it's going to be allowed to make. We're only putting one thing in the list for now, but that's why on this side, it's called methods with an S. And why it's in a list and not just one single string. Because we could say this accepts GET or POST requests, but now we're saying this function, this route, only accepts POST requests. So now let's see if we can get that to work. Refresh the page, and this is okay because we did not return. It says the function returned none or ended without a return statement, which is true. We didn't return anything over here, but we should see our print statement. And if we scroll above the error, we should see it right here. We are in the process form function. So we know that this is working. And let's talk about how we actually access the things. And now that we know we're here, let's just give ourselves maybe a couple of stars to see. Let's also print how the data from the form comes in. So let's go back to the main page and let's go ahead and type in some information here. It's Noel. Let's say noel@cd.com and hit submit. Whoop! Name request is not defined. Hopefully you remember that error from before. When we haven't defined something, that means we probably need to let it know we want to use the request, Flask's request. So let's go ahead and refresh that post request that we just made. Now we're back to a different error, which is true, we didn't return anything, but now if we scroll up to find our stars, we'll notice that it comes over as an immutable dictionary. This might not look like a dictionary, so it's a little bit of a weird syntax, but you'll see several tuples where the first value is the key name and the second is the key value from the form. And so over here, what we're able to do is we can look at them individually. Maybe username submitted, and we can get request.form, and again, it's a dictionary, so we can say the username, because that's the key there. And then email submitted was request.form email. Remember, these names are coming from the names that we provided for each of the input fields on our form. So if we save this and rerun that in our terminal, we should be able to see, whoop. Oh, I forgot my closing curly, so it quit running. So let's fix that. And let's try again. There we go. Oh, let's start from here. Go ahead and run noel@cd.com. Submit that. And now in our terminal, we can see that the username submitted is Noel and the email submitted was noel@cd.com, which is correct. So now let's finally just put it on a page. In a few lessons, we'll talk about why we don't ever want to render directly, but for now, let's just, for just the next couple of assignments, we'll go ahead and render the information on a new page. So let's create a new one, info.html, say, and let's just put it up here instead of printing it to our terminal. We can say username and email. And again, if we want variables on our HTML, that means when we render the template, so we give it the name of the template we want to render, but then we can provide a key name that we can then refer to it with Jinja on our HTML. So let's go ahead and call it name. And the value there is request.form, username, and em. And that is request.form email. So now we can use those on this side and say name and email, or em, right? Because remember, these are the keys that we can use. The argument names that we give are the names that we can then use on our Jinja. And so now, finally, when we run this, instead of, method not allowed because now it's only post request, and I just tried to make it get request by typing in the URL. So let's try my dog, Bruce, and it appears.